Hello and good morning to you. Just getting this computer set up and put aside. Hope you're all doing well today. Cyndilu coming to you live from New Zealand, and I'm about to begin our next installment or our next portion of the Book of God, the Bible as a Novel by Walter Wangerin Jr. I do wonder how to say his name. Anyway, we are on part 1, number 2, The Ancestors, Rebekah. Outside the city where Abraham's brother Nahor had lived and died, there was a well of fresh spring water. Abundant and dependable, the well served both the town and the travelers who passed by, caravans bearing rich goods east and west. In order to draw water from this particular well, a woman had to descend steps of uneven stone, kneel down and dip her jar in the flowing water, then heave the full container back up to her shoulder and climb the steps again. Beasts of burden, of course, could not go down in the grotto themselves, so their water was brought up by the jarful and poured into stone troughs built at ground level. Rebekah was familiar with the well and the routine. Daily at dusk, she went with a group of friends to draw water for their families. Bright young women, jars on their shoulders, and laughter rising like flocks of birds. Laughter rising like flocks of birds. What a wonderful way to put that, dear. Rebekah herself moved more quietly than the others. She was tall. She took a longer, more graceful stride. She had a forehead of intelligence and a manner of immediate conviction. Even surrounded by crowds, this woman seemed to stand alone. And so it happened one evening that as the women were coming up from the well with full jars, an old man stepped forward and spoke to Rebekah, as if she were the only one around. "Please," he said, "may I have a drink from your jar?" Clearly he was a traveler, dusty from the road, tired and very old enough to be her grandfather. Rebekah saw 10 camels kneeling here and there around the well, their heads on high. Her friends watched a moment, then left. It was growing dark, and Rebekah could take care of herself. "Yes," she said, lowering the jar to her hand. "Yes, please do drink." He took just a sip, never removing his eyes from her face. It caused her to blush. She said, "I'll draw water for your camels too, sir." And she did. Down and up the stone steps she went, pouring water into the drinking troughs, while the old man still gazed at her. She gave a proper thump to one beast, which then rose and ambled forward to drink. The others followed, and Rebekah kept filling the troughs until all 10 camels were satisfied. It was dark when she was done, and when the old man again approached her, he held in his hand objects so smooth and beautiful that they shined, a golden ring and 2 gold bracelets. "Whose daughter are you?" he said. Rebekah answered, "I am the daughter of Bethuel, who is the son of Nahor." "Nahor," the stranger murmured. "I know Nahor." He said the name with such emotion that he seemed about to burst into tears. He reached for Rebekah's hand and gently slipped the ring onto her finger. "Does Bethuel's house have room for me and my people to lodge for a while?" She said, "We have straw and provender, yes, and room, yes." Now the old man went down on his knees and raised his arms and chanted softly, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham. He has led me to the house of his kinsman." Without rising again, he clasped the bracelets around Rebekah's arms and said, "Please go. Please beg space for me for the night." Rebekah's father was old and infirm by then. It was her brother Laban who made most of his family's decisions. Laban didn't take an immediate interest in this story about the traveler from the West. He kept eating his supper. But then Rebekah removed her robe. He saw the gold and straightway left the house. While he was gone, Rebekah and her mother prepared more food. In time they heard Laban's voice outside. He was himself unbridling the man's camels. He was commanding his servants to bring water for the man's feet, and then he was saying, "Come in, O blessed of the Lord, come and eat." But when they were in the house and food was placed before him, the old man refused to eat. "Not till I have told my errand," he said. Laban said, "Speak on, friend." So he said, "I am Abraham's servant. The Lord has greatly blessed my master with flocks and herds, with silver and gold, men servants, maid servants, camels and asses. But Abraham has only one son, Isaac. And he made me swear in the land of Canaan to return to this land and to the house of his kindred, here to find a wife for Isaac. This very day I arrived at the well outside your city and prayed that God would prosper me in my task. I said, 'O Lord, when I ask a young woman to give me a drink, if she says, "Drink, and I will draw for your camels too," let her be the woman you've chosen for my master's son.' And behold, even before I was done praying, your sister came, Rebekah came, this beautiful woman came, and did all that I had asked of the Lord." "Now then," said the old man to Laban and Bethuel, "if you will deal loyally and honestly with my master, say so, and if not, say that too. I must know whether to turn to the right hand or to the left." Laban said, "Clearly the thing comes from the Lord. Take my sister and go. Let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken." All this Rebekah heard in shadow and in silence, standing erect in the same room while the men sat low around the oil lamp, speaking to one another. It was Abraham's servant who finally raised his eyes and acknowledged her. "Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel," he said. She took several steps into the light, and he said, "Receive these things." Then he handed her jewels of silver and gold, and raiment closely woven. He also gave her brother and her mother costly ornaments. Finally, he ate his supper. In the morning he said to his host, "Please allow me to go back to my master now. He's old and cannot live much longer." Laban said, "Oh, sir, no. Let the maiden take time to say goodbye. Be our guests in the meantime, at least 10 days. "Please," said the servant, "the journey is a long one. The season will turn to rain soon. Please." Laban said, "We should let Rebekah decide." Immediately Rebekah said, "I will go." Thus did Rebekah, this woman of quick conviction and utter self-assurance, in a night and a day transform her life thereafter and forever. In the month that followed, Rebekah and the old servant traveled from her home in Padan Aram, on the same road Abraham himself had taken more than 65 years earlier, a long southward route. They crossed the Jordan River at Succoth and journeyed yet farther south than the Salt Sea into the Negev. On the evening of the 30th day, while the camels were moving with weary languor, Rebekah lifted her eyes and saw a man strolling alone across the fields, his head bent down in meditation. "Who is that?" she said. She alighted from her camel and went to the old servant of Abraham. "Do you see that man in the distance?" she asked. "Who is he?" "Ah, that's the son of my master. That is Isaac." So Rebekah covered her face with a veil and waited to be seen by the man who would be her husband. In the Negev, then, Isaac took Rebekah to his tent, and she became his wife, and he loved her completely. He never loved another as long as he lived. He said, "As soon as I saw the woman standing tall by the side of the white field, I fell in love with her." He was 40 years old. At the age of 175, Abraham breathed his last and died, an old man full of years. His 2 sons came to bury him in the cave of Machpelah, in the field which he had purchased as a burial place for his wife. So they were gathered together in the end, Abraham and Sarah. But the brothers, Isaac and Ishmael, went their separate ways, never to meet again. The children of Ishmael lived in the wilderness of Paran. They became a wild fighting tribe, their young men expert with the bow, their hands against all other tribes. But after the death of Abraham, God blessed Isaac. For the next 20 years, he wandered throughout the Negev's wilderness, sojourning with his flocks and herds in the lands of other people, living in tents as Abraham had done before him. And like Sarah before her, Rebekah was barren. Isaac, why does the king want to see us? Who knows why kings do anything? No, but you know something. There's something you're not telling me. Well, yesterday, when we were lying in the barley field, Abimelech saw us. So what? Why should a king care about someone else's loving? It wasn't so much a question as a meditation. It wasn't so much a question as a meditation. Rebekah was beginning to wonder whether Isaac ought to strike camp and move away from this place, even before the harvest, if necessary. She was riding a handsome donkey. A light breeze tugged at her veil. Her husband had insisted that she veil herself for this particular interview. Isaac himself was washed and well-dressed, leading the donkey up a long road toward the whitewashed walls of the Philistine city called Gerar. They had been dwelling in this region for several seasons now, maintaining a fairly peaceful accord with the king of his people. In the beginning, Isaac had spent time in the city gates, gossiping with the citizens. But lately his flocks and fields had been prospering more than those of Gerar, and when his servants discovered a fresh water in an old well, the men of Gerar came and demanded it for themselves. Isaac shrugged and gave it over, and ordered his servants to dig another well. But when that well also brought forth the sweet water, the same men came to claim it, this time armed and angry, ready to fight. Isaac didn't want to fight. Though he himself was a good hunter, he was not a good fighting man, or he was not a fighting man. He relinquished this well too. So Rebekah was thinking that it was time for them to rise up and travel elsewhere. Suddenly she snapped out of her meditations. Isaac, she said sharply, I think I want you to answer that question. What question? Why Abimelech should be concerned about our lying together. If a wife wants children, what is that to a king? A wife, Isaac mumbled low. A wife, yes, not a sister. What? What did you say? I said not a sister. Isaac, turn and look at me. What do you mean, not a sister? Isaac turned, but he did not look at his wife. He said, when we first came here, the men of Gerar saw how beautiful you are, and they asked about you. I was afraid they might kill the husband to get at his wife. But for a sister, they would let the brother alone. I told them that you were my sister. Rebekah gazed at Isaac a while, sitting as straight as a rod of iron upon her mount. Then she removed her veil and gathered her robes tightly around her body, snatching the bridle from her husband's hand, turned the donkey and rode alone back toward the tents. Let Isaac keep his interview with the king. Let Isaac explain his own folly. Let Isaac grant her respectability again, and with a confession make her his wife for the second time. But now she was convinced the time had come to move on. As her husband approached the 60th year of his life, Rebekah and Isaac encamped again at Beer-lahai Roi, near the same field where they first set eyes on one another. She was younger than he, but they had been married for 20 years without children, and Rebekah longed for children. One night she wept loudly and angrily on account of her longing. The following morning Isaac came into her compartment, took her hand, and led her to the high rocky hill, where he lifted her hands in prayer on his wife's behalf, Then they went back down to their tent. They spent the rest of the day together, and soon Rebekah had no need to cry for want of a child she had conceived. She was smiling and radiant again, and pregnant. Ah, dark Rebekah! When she smiled, her eye was the secret moon in a black Galena sky. Her passage was so slow and so graceful as to bind men's hearts to the vision forever. At 3 months to term, Rebekah began to experience crushing pains in her womb. She would suddenly cry out, then clap her hands across the mouth in order to cover the sound. If it has to be in this way, she thought, why should I go on living? This time she went alone to the sacred hill where Isaac had prayed before. She raised her hands and said, "What is it, Lord? O Lord, what is happening to me?" And the Lord God said, "2 nations are wrestling within your womb. 2 people born of your body, Rebekah, shall suffer a lasting division. One shall be stronger than the other. The elder shall serve his younger brother." And so it was that when the time came for Rebekah to be delivered, she gave birth to twin boys. The first one came out wrinkled and red, and so hairy he seemed to be wearing a coat. And the second came immediately behind, clutching his brother's heel. So they named the first infant Esau, and the next they named Jacob, because already within the womb he was seizing his brother's heel. As he grew into adulthood, Esau became a plainsman, like his father. He would go away by himself for a few months at a time, living off the land, hunting. He had an accurate eye and an instinctive knowledge of his quarry: gazelle, oryx, ibex, and all wild goats, mountain sheep, beasts of a garnier taste that fattened domestic animals. A broad-chested, red-haired man, Esau lived by the strength of his arm. Even when he sat among the tents, he was not given to much talk. Jacob, on the other hand, stayed continually in range of the household, the flocks, and fields and tents. He dearly loved a cunning conversation. Jacob's face, like his mother's, was smooth and mobile with intelligence. And he was a verbal fellow, more confident of his wit than of his arm. Their father Isaac loved the game Esau brought home and cooked for him. Their mother loved Jacob. To be continued is Rebekah.